rebuilding this city. I want to carve something beautiful out of its ugliness. Set free its potential.
You sound like an artist.
Welcome back, ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy. A few months ago, when I watched Will Smith slap Chris Rock at the Oscars,
Oh, wow!
I had the same thought everybody else did. Kingpin was right.
Wait, that had nothing to do with Will Smith.
It had everything to do with Will Smith, and I'm going to tell you why, and why I think that Wilson Fisk may not have been a noble man, but at least he had noble goals, at least in season 1. That's right, Kingpin was right. So first, I have to talk about why Wilson Fisk is so different from every other villain in the MCU. Marvel has given us a lot of terrible villains, and a few great ones, and all the great ones had the same thing in common.
What was that?
Relatability. Now, we may not agree with their means, but we empathize with their goals. Of all the villains, Wilson Fisk is the most human. Vincent D'Onofrio once described him in 3 words: monster and child, which is pretty baller. He didn't even need the second word. He just wasted it on a conjunction.
Fisk is really driven by emotion. You know, he's like a child and a monster, both at the same time, so...
Now, it's often said that when a child experiences trauma, they never mature fully past that age. And you can see this with Wilson Fisk. He's shy, nervous. He always avoids eye contact in social situations. Heck, I bet he would be a ScreenCrush subscriber if he were in the real world. Add in like a goatee and a Deadpool t-shirt, and this is the kind of guy I could run into at a con. Maybe that's one of the reasons I like him. He's one of us.
One of us. Gobble, gobble, one of us. We accept that one of us.
Also, he's very polite.
Can I get a coffee, please, black?
Can I get you anything to eat, sir?
No, thank you, Francis.
Always saying please, always giving respect to the people who live in polite society. He's exceptionally gentle with Vanessa.
I don't like to be questioned, but you can ask me anything, Vanessa. I will always be honest with you.
Most of the time when villains are being bad, they seem to really enjoy it.
Kneel before me and rise into the ranks of my great conquest.
Son of Krypton versus Bat of Gotham.
Heck, Palpatine even seemed to get off on it. But for Fisk, he's always holding back that evil inside him. But D'Onofrio still manifests this darkness, this anger with his physicality, his twitch, the way he brings his hands together. You get the feeling that this is a man who spends every moment of his life trying to be good, but the world just wants him to be bad. But mostly, we can relate to his end goal. He doesn't want money or a criminal empire. He wants to fix the city.
That's only because you've been manipulated. Poisoned into believing the news media's fake story. That I am evil because I've told the truth and tried to make this city a better place.
He wants to make New York beautiful and clean, and he's willing to get dirty to make this dream come true. He is capable of great cruelty.
I want to look in their eyes. When I salt the earth with their blood, I told her the safest place she could ever be was by my side.
This wasn't your fault.
She's lying in there because she was by my side.
Now in that way, he's a lot like Matt Murdock.
You and I have a lot in common.
We're nothing alike.
Both boys were very smart, they were bullied, and they grew up in Hell's Kitchen. Matt's family life was also affected by organized crime, and they both lost their dads to violence and were raised by their mothers, and both made a promise to eradicate the evil that corrupted their childhoods. But mostly, they both hurt people, but Matt Murdock enjoys beating people up. Wilson also loves using violence, but he hates that he loves it. Mostly, we can identify with Wilson because he does not want to rule the city. He's not Marlowe, he doesn't care about the crown. He gathers power because he needs these tools to accomplish his goals.
Money and influence is not enough to usher change on such a scale. Sometimes it requires force.
The city's really changing.
Not fast enough.
Now just to recap, in season 1 of Daredevil, Wilson is working with 4 other interests to rebuild Hell's Kitchen after the Battle of New York, which is kind of silly because Hell's Kitchen is here and the battle took place here, but whatever. He teams up with these gangsters to rebuild.
You can tear down the rest of Hell's Kitchen and build your better tomorrow.
He insists that they all split the revenue equally 5 ways.
Profits will be divided up equally among us.
Even in his later appearances, he doesn't consolidate power for his own good, but for the good of the city. Wilson sees himself as a different class of criminal. He has a low opinion of the Russians.
For the men that did that, they will no longer infect this city.
And he believes that his vision is what's best for the city. How is that any different from most leaders or politicians? Some of our greatest presidents held a firm conviction that they were right. Hell, so did Captain America.
If we sign this, we surrender our right to choose.
In fact, that's a great comparison. Steve Rogers' fondest desire was to leave the shield behind and live a normal life, and Wilson wishes that he could leave the city behind.
I used to dream what it would be like to live somewhere far away from Hell's Kitchen.
But he sees the city as part of him. It's in his blood, which is tragic because he also sees the city as dirty and diseased. So in his mind, if he can clean up the city, then he can make that part of himself clean. Wilson was raised in New York in the 1970s, when the city was frankly at its dirtiest, on the inside and outside. Garbage strikes, high crime, the Bronx is burning, Summer of Sam. It was a time when the lower classes felt like they could not catch a break. So his dad decided that to break through this economic disparity, he would run for local office to join their club.
This city, it's everything. It's right there. All you gotta do is put your mind to it and make it happen.
So his dad preached this lesson that the only reason people are poor is because they're not man enough to go out and get what they want. So Willie grew up thinking that he had to be a better man than everyone else. Fisk believes in exceptionalism, that a few people are better off leading the masses. And you know what? Most of the heroes in the MCU also share this philosophy. Tony became a superhero without the consent or knowledge of the government. The Avengers operate without supervision. In fact, Tony invented Ultron, Steve defied the Sokovia Accords. You were all there, you remember all this stuff. Remember this exchange between Matt and Fisk?
You're feeding off this city like a cancer.
Then Fisk replies with his primary justification.
I want to save this city, only on a scale that matters.
Wilson Fisk is right about one thing for sure. There will always be crime. Until we all have replicators like Star Trek or a Garfield Christmas Special wish machine, there's always going to be inequalities and someone will always want to take what someone else has. So Fisk is not trying to stop crime. He recognizes that is futile. Instead, he wants to become the only crime. He wants everything to work toward a single unified system.
Believe me, Daredevil is our true public enemy.
He believes that if he can control crime, then crime can also be a tool for making people's lives better. And most importantly, he reluctantly accepts this burden of leadership for the good of the slobbering masses.
This world around us is preoccupied with celebrity weddings and videos of cats.
And you know what? He's kind of right. We suck. There are a million vital pieces of news that just zip by us every day that we just ignore. We read the news that we want to read, we watch the TV that confirms our pre-existing bias, and we love for people to tell us what to do.
What's your sole purpose in this army?
To do whatever you tell me, drill sergeant.
God damn it, Gump! You're a goddamn genius.
And by the way, I'm talking about me and everyone else, not about you. You are great and very well informed. You should be proud of yourself. Wilson decides that he is the best person to lead the people because the people are incapable of seeing that they live in filth. So they could never make themselves clean. And we're going to hear that word a lot. Clean, because it strikes at the heart of who Wilson Fisk is. His desire to make the world better is his greatest strength, and also it's his greatest weakness, because Wilson Fisk's idea of cleanliness is impossible to achieve. He wants the city to be like an Apple store, a kind of unobtainable illusion of perfection. I mean, just look how he lives. His perfect world is clean lines, white surroundings, pure. But this isn't much different from Superman's Fortress of Solitude, and that guy is the best superhero of all time.
Cool costume.
Thanks. My mom made it for me.
Wilson is like this because he was never shown the beauty of imperfections. But let's pull a Grand Admiral Thrawn here and learn by studying his art. You can tell a lot about someone by the art they make or about the art that they enjoy.
I don't have your eye, but I hung them where I guessed you would like them.
His favorite piece of art is called Rabbit in a Snowstorm. And why does he like it?
It makes me feel alone.
So what does that mean? Well, like a lot of people who went through trauma, Wilson is constantly living with that trauma. In his case, he always sees his own reflection as a blood-splattered child who just killed his father. And this brings us back to Will Smith.
I was wondering when we were gonna get to that.
Well, here it is. Last year, Will Smith published a memoir called Will, where he revealed a dark part of his childhood. His father was physically abusive to his mother, and Will felt enormous guilt for not being able to protect her from that violence. Now, Just like Wilson Fisk looks in a mirror and sees that little boy, Will carries his own traumatized inner child around with him every day. But this also isn't too far from the origin of Batman. Adult Bruce Wayne is constantly remembering that night, seeing himself on the face of every orphan child. Heck, Fisk's favorite dessert is even the same one that he had as a kid.
When I was a kid, I loved it. Probably loved it a bit too much.
In many ways, he has never grown up. The poet William Wordsworth wrote that the child is the father of the man. In other words, our future selves are shaped by our past. Though he was actually talking about being happy when he saw Rainbow, not about trauma.
Back to Will Smith.
Yes, thank you. So, Will Smith grew up being afraid of violence and feeling guilt about not being able to protect the most important woman in his life. So, at the Oscars, he tried to laugh off Chris Rock's joke about his wife's baldness, but Jada Pinkett Smith suffers from a hair loss disease called alopecia and has been very upfront with how hard this has been for her. So Will Smith looks over at her, sees how much the joke hurt her feelings, and suddenly, Will Smith is no longer a man in his 50s with the eyes of the world on him. He's a little boy who wants to protect his mom. He basically said this in his speech.
I'm being called on in my life to love people and to protect people.
Now, this reminded me of the Kingpin because he had a similar childhood and a similar relationship to violence.
You hurt her! Wait! You hurt Vanessa!
Violence usually makes people want to commit more violence for revenge or for justice. So, in many ways, violence just creates a cycle of violence. In this way, violence is a prison. And you know what Fisk said about his love for Vanessa.
Love is the perfect prison. Inescapable.
As a child, Willie Fisk did not like violence. His dad beat his mother. Violence made him afraid. But his dad didn't just show him violence, he taught it. When another kid bullies Wilson, his dad beats him up, and then he forces Willie to help.
People like this, they want to keep you down, keep you afraid. You have to show them that that can never happen.
So Willie learned the lesson. Violence liberates you from fear, and he turned this lesson back onto his father. So his dad, in trying to make his son into a violent man, was killed by that same violence.
Keep kicking him! Kick him!
Keep kicking him! Keep kicking him!
Again, violence is a cycle. So Wilson turns this lesson into a mantra, but he has to constantly remind himself that he is violent for the right reasons.
That's why I still wear these. To remind myself that I'm not cruel for the sake of cruelty. That I'm not my father. That I'm not a monster.
But it wasn't just his father who taught him that violence was a solution. So did his mom. She helped cover up the murder, and the death of her abusive husband made their lives better. You can look at this like a supervillain origin story, or as a superhero's origin story. This moment, the death of his dad, begins a life spent trying to make the world safe for people like his mother, or, as he always puts it, to make the world clean.
I wanted to make this city something better than it is. Something beautiful.
Now, I already talked about how, in Wilson's mind, the city is in his blood and the city is dirty. And we've seen that he always sees himself as a child dirty, splattered in his father's blood. Now, this idea that we're all permanently stained with blood is one of the bedrocks of Catholicism. There's the idea of original sin, that we're all tainted by the original sin of the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge. Daredevil is the most Catholic show on TV.
Even more than the two popes?
Yes, Doug, Daredevil's more Catholic than the two popes. When he was a kid, Willie's dad would make him stare at the wall until he learned his lesson, until he became clean.
You sit here and you stare at that wall.
So, as an adult, looking at a blank wall or at the painting makes him feel like he is atoning, that he is purifying himself. As an adult, Fisk's life is shaped by two women who represent the two halves of his mother. There's Madame Gao, who, like his mom, rewards him for violence.
Man cannot be both savior and oppressor, light and shadow.
And then there is Vanessa, who represents everything that he hoped the city could become. She always wears white. She's the image of purity. She shows him that he is not stained with sin.
It wasn't your fault. You were protecting your mother.
Then, instead of waking up and staring at the painting to feel pure, he wakes up and looks at Vanessa.
Why are you talking about Vanessa? This has nothing to do with Will Smith or why the Kingpin was right.
This has everything to do with why the Kingpin was right. What we see in him is a man who is brilliant, capable of enormous kindness, but who can also cause enormous pain, not unlike Tony Stark. This is someone whose soul was twisted as a child. He just wants to heal, but he never can. So instead, He wants to heal the world. His goals are no different from Batman's or Tony Stark's. He wants to overcome his childhood trauma by making the world a better place. And much like Matt Murdock praying to God that he's doing the right thing, he lives by his own mantra.
To remind myself that I'm not cruel for the sake of cruelty.
Wilson does some horrible things during the show. He strangles Ben Urich. He kills this sweet old lady.
Her passing is a symptom of a larger disease.
But he does this because he's willing to get dirty, so the rest of us can be clean. Just like we send soldiers off to fight our wars to keep us safe, Wilson is willing to get blood on his hands to make the world better for the rest of us. Fisk, at least in season 1, was trying to create a lasting peace, to become the darkness so the rest of us can live in a brighter world.
He loved his city and all the people in it. I always thought that I was the Samaritan in that story. It means that I'm not the Samaritan. I am the ill intent.
And Daredevil, well, what does he do? He beats up some guys, locks them up, and then they're back on the street the next day. Now, Matt Murdock actually ruined Wilson's dream. He showed him that it was a lie. And the first season ends with Fisk in prison, staring at a blank wall and dreaming once again of the purity that he can never obtain. But what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, welcome to the channel. Please subscribe and ring that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I am Ryan Airy.